My name is Amelia Reed. I am 31. If you met me at a party, you'd notice the habit of my hands first. The way they smooth a napkin, tuck a stray curl behind an ear, tap a sensible rhythm on whatever surface is closest. I like lists. I like budgets. I like routines so clean they look like promises. I'm the person who shows up early, fixes the slow router, and remembers the Wi-Fi password when everyone else forgets. That became my identity, the one I learned to wear because it bought a kind of peace I didn't know how else to get. Growing up, my older sister Jenna was the golden girl, homecoming queen, big laugh, the sort of person who could make a crowded room orbit her without meaning to. Mom adored her like it was a religion. Max, my younger brother, learned to keep his head down. Survival by smallness. I learned to pay attention. Back then, my help was small. $20, a ride share, a fix-it favor. It felt like family. It felt like love. It didn't start the way any good drama begins, with a single, cinematic betrayal. It started like many things do in houses that run on favors. A quiet request on a Tuesday while I was stirring pasta. My phone lit up with the photo message from Max's cat, asleep like a croissant. I smiled. Then an unknown number slid into my messages with a photo I'd seen 1,000 times. Chloe in a dress mood board, hair swatches, the kind of manic, excited collage teenagers make into futures. "Hey, Auntie A," the message said. "Can you send $2,100 for prom?" $2,100. For prom. For hair and dress and nails and shoes and a limo and a photographer who would later post an album that would collect other people's hearts and likes. I stared at the image until the pixels blurred. When Mom called, her voice was warm and practiced, the voice she uses when she wants the world to see she's only slightly worried. "You've got enough right now, honey," she said. "Chloe deserves this. Senior prom is once in a lifetime." I could hear Jenna laughing in the background, the clink of ice. Someone said, "He'll do it." That was the moment the old mechanisms clicked into place. Not the amount, not the dress, but the assumption, the entitlement delivered soft and certain. I put the spoon down and looked at my kitchen. The bills clipped to the fridge, the calendar with perfect boxes, the plants that were somehow still alive despite me. I'd built this little order so I wouldn't drown in other people's chaos. When did it become everyone else's default? It took time to become what they needed. Dad died when I was 24. He left a hole and a spreadsheet. Mom pulled me into the hallway after the funeral and said in that flat, efficient way she has when she asks for something she already expects, "I can't do this alone." I said, "We'll figure it out together." We did. Together meant me doing the heavy lifting so the rest of them could breathe. By 28, I was the one with Autopay privileges. The mortgage, utilities, emergency cards, a Hulu account we fought over like it was a precious heirloom. I started small and the requests grew clever. Car insurance, a deposit, a medical copay, designer candles that made the house feel nicer for guests. Each request arrived polished with an apology and a promise. The promises shrank into silence. There were humiliations that were not bills. Mom would post a family dinner I'd paid for and caption "blessed" without tagging me. Jenna would roll in late and joke, "Our family CFO is here," while everyone laughed. I took pride in being reliable. I took pride until pride calcified into resentment I didn't have the language for. Caleb, my boyfriend, had noticed the pattern long before I had the courage to name it. He's patient in the way people who grew up without too much drama tend to be. He'd say practical things like, "You need a buffer account," or "You deserve someone who doesn't treat your paycheck like a suggestion." He was solid enough that, at night over lukewarm coffee, we'd map out small defenses. He'd learned boundaries a different way. His family wasn't a drama machine. He'd been through a messy breakup with an ex, Vanessa, who'd once labeled him soft for refusing to bankroll her lifestyle when they split. The memory of that hissed in our first months and reminded him why he respected my decisions. Caleb didn't lecture. He kept a calm presence and a toolkit of small strategies, a joint emergency plan for us, a separate savings envelope for Amelia's piece. When Chloe's text came, it was one of those moments when history and habit converge. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I could feel a ledger of 5 years scrolling in my head. Mortgage autopays, car breakdowns, the times I'd wired money at midnight to stop a bank from calling, the way being debt-free once made me a resource rather than a person. I typed 4 words. Earn it, kiddo. It was a slip more than a sermon. The phrase landed like a stone across the family pool. Within an hour, the machine I'd been feeding for years began to whir. Jenna texted, "We need the money tonight. Don't make this a thing." Mom called twice, then left a message that sounded small and dangerous. "You promised your father." Chloe sent a photo of the dress she liked, and then another. "Please." My phone began to buzz like a hive. I felt something in my chest click. Not a snap, but a lock turning. I'd done the math. I'd kept the books. I'd paid the mortgage from my account temporarily while Mom sorted things out, the word temporarily written in the air like a prayer no one took seriously. I remember the moment I set up the Autopay 3 years earlier, feeling like I'd bought my family's security. I never imagined it would become their expectation. That night, after I turned the phone face down and waited for the guilt to arrive, I logged into the bank and found the Autopay toggle I had never once flipped off. My hands were steadier than I expected. The warning pop-up said, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. The familiar green slid to gray. Then I disabled the emergency card Chloe sometimes used. I left the sitcom Hulu account alone. I closed the door on one long-running concession. I would not fund another adult's emergencies just because they had learned to ask me first. I slept without the usual itching panic that wakes me at 3 a.m. For the first time in years, the quiet of my apartment felt like space, not a gathering storm. At 8:05 the next morning, my phone showed 63 missed calls. Mom, Jenna, Chloe, a bank, Max. The family group chat had erupted. 112 messages shouting for explanations. Caleb texted almost immediately. "You okay?" he wrote. "Proud of you," he added a beat later. I looked at those 2 words and let myself breathe. Stopping didn't feel cinematic. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt ordinary and terrifying and necessary. I made 2 lists that morning. One titled, "What I Pay For That Isn't Mine," the other, "What I Choose." The math didn't make me cruel, it made me human. The old rhythm, the one where love equals invoices, had been beaten into me so patiently I'd forgotten there were other measures. Outside, life kept making small noises. A neighbor's laugh, a TV laugh track bleeding through a wall, the hum of a delivery truck. Inside, the room I'd carved for myself by paying everyone else's way had a new emptiness on the calendar where the Autopay used to be. It felt like moving heavy furniture out of a room. The grooves remained, but the floor was easier to sweep. I didn't know then how much it would cost me in social comfort, how many people would call me cruel for asking other adults to adult. But I did know something steadier. I wasn't invisible because I covered things for them. I was invisible because they treated covering as my only value. Turning the Autopay off felt like turning a page. I could almost hear the paper edge in my mouth. At the end of that day, Chloe texted again, a photo of a simpler dress, cheaper shoes found on sale. "Can we split?" she wrote. I typed back a plan. Bookstore shifts, weekend tutoring, half now, half on, show proof of receipts. It was practical and small, and, to my surprise, proud. She sent a bounce of a heart emoji that wasn't filtered or performative. It landed differently than the family messages. It felt earned. There was a moment, quiet, without witnesses, where I imagined never turning the Autopay back on. I imagined Sunday mornings with Max and coffee and conversation that wasn't about who owed who. I imagined Caleb and me as partners who kept each other's backs instead of my family, using me as a backstop. For the first time in a long time, the idea of boundaries did not sound like punishment. It sounded like shelter. The first battle had begun. I didn't know where it would end. I only knew that for the first time in years, I had chosen something that belonged to me. The morning after I flipped the Autopay, my phone looked like a crime scene. 63 missed calls. A group chat that had been a benign tumbleweed of memes and grocery lists had turned into an interrogation room. Jenna posted a story with Chloe's tear-streaked face and the caption, "When a grown man ruins your senior year." Mom forwarded a bank notice with the subject line, "Late notice, mortgage." The messages piled up like a physical pressure against my chest. Caleb texted first, quietly, "Do you want me there with you today?" He didn't mean for appearances only. He meant the weight of someone else sitting in the same room as me when my family tried to make me small. That smallness had 100 names: selfish, ungrateful, villain. And the older I get, the more I understand how much of family control sits in the ability to shame someone into giving. I decided to go to work. Hospitals are good for keeping the louder parts of your life compartmentalized. Machines have rhythms you can trust. In the lobby, a security guard called up to the floor with a tone that said he was carrying something alive. "Your mother is here," he said, as if I should be grateful she'd come in person instead of letting apps do the shouting. She carried that courtroom face she uses when she wants the world to sympathize with her victimhood. "We need to talk," she said. There was no question in her voice. I sat across from her and felt 3 years of unpaid patience crowd the space between my fingers. "You embarrassed me," she started, like a charge on a small, well-practiced ledger. Embarrassment was the first weapon she used in public, shame framed as wounded dignity. "The bank calling was accountability," she said. "I called it betrayal." After years of being the one who smoothed edges, who turned crises into footnotes, I had printed a list and folded it until it fit neatly in my pocket. Mortgages, utilities, car repairs, medical copays, last-minute groceries, receipts pasted into my memory like stamps. I pulled it out and slid it across the table. "Here," I said. "This is everything I paid after Dad died. I'm not asking for repayment. I'm asking you to see that this is real." She blinked as though the paper might bite. "Of course you kept track," she said, a petty compliment that stung. "You've always been very responsible." She tried to fold the conversation into something tidy. Family helps family. That sentence had been used so often it did the work of a legal precedent in our house. I said the thing I'd rehearsed silently for years. Family helps. Family also respects boundaries. The words landed on the linoleum and didn't break. Her playbook changed. Soften, then threaten. "You promised your father," she said, and the promise was a well-worn key in a pocket that fit every locked room. I said I had promised to help, not to be the bank for a lifetime. The line between help and entitlement had blurred for them because I had never drawn the edges. When the family machine realized the autopay was off, it didn't go quietly. Calls to aunts, cousins, Dad's old friends, people who had once seen me as the reliable child, began forwarding messages. "We're worried about the family," some wrote. "It's just money." Another sent. "You'll regret this when your mother is gone." Regret as a threat. Regret as a moral cudgel. Jenna escalated on social media as if the platform itself owed her an audience. She curated her outrage. A story here, a passive-aggressive caption there. Max, who kept his head down, came by with takeout and sat on my couch as if he were visiting a war zone. "You really did it?" he asked, saying the words like a prayer and a question. "Yes," I told him. He looked at my plants like someone who'd found something fragile and living in a place that had been a battlefield. Later, over coffee, he asked, "Are you okay being the villain for a while?" His voice was honest. People who don't take up space for themselves learn to protect others by absorbing blame. "Villainy is flexible," I said, and we both laughed because what else do you do with family-size guilt? Caleb's support was not theatrical. He didn't post a statement or engage in sparring. He listened. He texted when he couldn't be with me. "Hold the line. I'll be there if you need me." But his presence was complicated by his history. Vanessa had once told him he was weak for setting boundaries. Her words had carved a scar that made him cautious about public shows of support. I could tell sometimes he measured his steps, afraid that if he leaned in too hard, he'd be accused of colluding. And if he didn't lean in, he'd be failing me. She, Vanessa, never had a large role in my life, only as a whisper in Caleb's backstory. But gossip loves the ex. When Jenna started mentioning Caleb in the family group chat, "Maybe Caleb can talk some sense into you." I felt the old dynamics reassert. Men as arbitrators, women as emotional laborers. Caleb texted, "Ignore it," but even he couldn't stop the family from trying to recruit him into their narrative. The therapist's waiting room smelled faintly of citrus. I'd delayed going for years, embarrassed by what it might mean to need someone to help me learn to say the word boundary out loud. The first session felt like taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. The therapist asked simple questions that made my old equations wobble. What do you want your life to look like if your family never changes? She asked. No one had asked it like that, as if my life could be designed regardless of their choices. Calm, I said, surprising myself. Honest. Mine. The shape of the answer felt like a small revolution. Outside the therapist's office, Amelia Reed, who coded spreadsheets and loved routine, bumped into real Amelia, nervous and human. I started to see how the ledger of generosity had been converted into an unspoken contract where my role was given and my boundaries were politely invisible. Meanwhile, Chloe began to work. Amelia, not the me who was the family bank, but the me who believed in small dignity, gave her a list. Weekend bookstore shifts, a tutoring center that needed math help, a cafe that tipped well. Chloe took a job at the shop and texted me photo updates. Her first shift, a sweaty but happy selfie, an excited, exhausted face. She found a cheaper dress, and we split the shoes. The moment she sent me the receipt, the little paper proof of effort, it landed differently than any forwarded bank notice. It was a proof that someone had earned something. Mom, predictably, framed the change as an emergency. The late notice arrived in her voice like a threat. Look what you did, she texted. Don't forget who put your name on certain things. The old guilt lever. The family had been trained to read my previous forbearance as entitlement to my funds. I replied once in the group chat with a message that felt like a boundary and a promise. I love you all. I am not discussing my finances with anyone but me. I will not be paying the mortgage. It was the most adult sentence I'd ever typed to my family. The social flurry calmed in some ways, but not in others. Jenna called me heartless. Friends and distant relatives sent messages that read like editorial notes on my morality. I started getting calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. When that first month passed, Mom posted a vague status. Sometimes the people you raise disappoint you. I didn't engage. Social media was a theater that rewarded outrage. At home, my world shifted into smaller, quieter routines. Max and I instituted Sunday coffee, phones face down. Chloe texted a mirror selfie on prom night, simplest hair, cheeks flushed, shoes purchased with her own tips, a shy smile that meant more than 1,000,000 perfectly curated posts could. I'd helped her get the job. She did the rest. Her heart emoji, the real one, felt earned. Caleb and I had conversations I'd never thought I'd have so openly, about money, about roles, about how we showed up for each other. He learned to speak for me in small ways, and I learned to let him. Our relationship wasn't dramatized. It was practical, stubborn, and patient. Vanessa remained, at most, a ghost in the group chat noise, an echo of Caleb's past critics. But our partnership began to feel like a place where lines were not invasions, where saving was not a performance for someone else's applause. The family's pressure had been loud, and it had blinked the lights in my life. But the machine I'd been keeping stable for years had stopped. The silence after it halted was not emptiness, so much as room. I could hear my own thinking again, and for the first time I could imagine life on the other side, where help came with receipts, and where peace did not require paying for someone else's mistakes. I didn't know if the truce with my mother would hold. I didn't know if Jenna would relapse into old habits when the next emergency came, but I had changed in ways small and complete. I'd learned to say no and keep the word, to sleep without a knot of anxiety in my throat. Boundaries, it turns out, are boring and radical at once. The second month after I shut off Autopay arrived like a storm pretending to be a drizzle. Quiet at first, too quiet. No frantic calls, no guilt-laced texts, no blurry screenshots of overdue notices. Silence from my family was never peace. It was strategy. They were regrouping, and they struck exactly the way I expected, through the one person they thought I couldn't refuse. Max, my younger brother, the softest spot in my armor. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, hair messy, wearing that nervous half-smile he used whenever Mom sent him into battle. He wasn't holding coffee or takeout, just his phone, screen cracked at the corner, and a look that said he'd been rehearsing this for hours. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded and watched him sink into my couch like a kid visiting the principal's office. He didn't dance around it. "Mom's really upset." I waited. "They're saying you're abandoning us," he continued. "That you're punishing everyone. It doesn't feel true, but I don't know what to think anymore." His voice cracked on the last part, the confused wobble of someone caught between loyalty and reality. "Max," I said gently, I didn't abandon anyone. I stopped paying for grown adults who refused to manage their lives. He nodded, but his eyes stayed unfocused. They're behind on the house again, he admitted quietly. Mom's scared they're going to lose it. I exhaled slowly. There it was, the word lose, the one they knew would trigger the savior reflex I'd been conditioned into. Do you want the truth? I asked. He looked up. That house is not my responsibility, I said calmly, and it never was. I stepped in after Dad died because someone had to, but I can't keep doing it alone. But you're the only one who... I know, I cut in gently. I know I've been the one keeping everything afloat. But if I keep doing it, nothing will ever change. They will keep using you, using me, and calling it love. He swallowed hard. I don't want things to fall apart. They won't fall apart, I assured. They'll just stop depending on me as the fix. That scared him more, because when you're raised in chaos, stability looks suspicious. He leaned back against the couch. I got a second job, he confessed softly, to help. My chest tightened with pride and heartbreak in equal measure. You didn't have to, I said. I know, he whispered, but I want to. That was the difference, wanting to help instead of being forced. We talked for another hour, about work, about Chloe's new job, about how quiet the group chat has been since I stopped responding. He left with a tentative smile, the kind that said he might not fully understand my choices, but he trusted I wasn't lying. 2 days later, the group chat erupted again. Jenna posted another melodramatic story. Funny how some people think self-care means letting your sister drown. Mom followed with a voice note filled with sniffles and carefully placed silence. She was performing grief, not experiencing it. Then came the message that made my jaw clench. Mom, your father would be disappointed in you. Weaponized memory. Classic. I didn't reply. But someone else did. Max. Stop guilt-tripping her. She has carried us for years. You all need to step up for once. The chat went dead silent. Then, Mom, how dare you speak to me like that? Jenna, wow, brainwashed. Aunt Lisa, is this what therapy does to people? So rude. Max didn't respond again, but I saw what it cost him. Because 5 minutes later, he sent me a private text. I'm shaking. Did I do the right thing? I wrote back, yes, and I'm proud of you. The next week, something shifted. Not dramatically, but enough for me to feel it. Mom applied for a financial counseling program through the community center. Jenna started taking on weekend shifts at her job instead of bailing at the last minute. Even the relatives who once treated me like a walking ATM kept their distance, wary now, realizing the machine was no longer dispensing for free. But the most surprising change came from Chloe. She asked if we could get lunch. When she walked into the cafe, she was wearing the simple dress she had bought with her own earnings. No mascara streaks, no pity-seeking aura, just confidence. She sat down and blurted out, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I blinked. I didn't understand what was happening, she admitted. Everyone kept saying you were controlling or rude or selfish. But after working for just 3 weeks, I realized how much things actually cost. Shoes, food, gas. I never thought about it before. Her voice softened. You've always helped us, and I never said thank you. I didn't cry, but my throat tightened. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. You were a kid surrounded by loud adults. I don't blame you. She smiled shyly. I don't want your money, but I do want your advice. You're the only person who doesn't make me feel stupid. For the first time in months, something warm replaced the exhaustion inside me. A rebuilt bridge. Not because I paid for it, but because she walked across it herself. Later that night, Caleb came over with groceries and a soft kiss to my temple. We cooked together in the quiet comfort of people who'd survived chaos and learned to choose each other without fear. You look lighter, he murmured, handing me the chopped vegetables. I feel lighter, I said, because the truth was simple. I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the family's enemy. I'd just stopped performing martyrdom. And when the dust settled, the people who genuinely loved me stayed. The ones who only loved what I could give them, they faded into the background. Not gone, but no longer running the show. What came next wasn't a dramatic ending, it was something better. A beginning. The beginning of the 3rd month was when everything truly cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. It cracked the way ice does. Quiet, inevitable, with pressure building below the surface long before anyone hears the fracture. It started with a knock on my door. Not Max, not Chloe, not Caleb. Mom! Standing there with a manila folder clutched so tightly her knuckles were white. Her lipstick uneven, hair pinned too neatly, like she'd tried to look composed but lost the fight on the way over. Can we talk? She asked, voice thin. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit. She paced. A mother who had always lived in control now couldn't even control her own footsteps. Finally, she dropped the folder onto my coffee table. The papers spilled out. Overdue mortgage notices, bank statements, a foreclosure warning. I didn't reach for them. I thought they were wrong, she whispered. I thought if I ignored them, it would sort itself out. I stayed silent, because silence is where truth reveals itself. Then she looked at me, really looked. Not as the daughter she expected to rescue her, but as someone she had pushed past her limit. Her voice broke. I didn't realize how much you were doing. I thought money came easily to you. I let out a small, tired laugh. Money never comes easily to anyone. She rubbed her forehead. I told myself you were better off, stronger, more stable, so I didn't have to feel guilty asking. There it was, the quiet confession I never thought I'd hear. She continued, voice trembling. But after you stopped, everything fell apart faster than I expected, and I kept waiting for you to fix it. I met her eyes. That's the problem, Mom. You weren't waiting for help. You were waiting for rescue. A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away angrily, like it betrayed her. Do you hate me? She whispered. I inhaled sharply. The question landed heavier than any overdue bill in that folder. No, I said, but I hate what this turned me into. I hate who I became when I tried to keep everyone else from drowning. She sank onto the couch, shoulders sagging. I didn't know how else to keep the family together. By sacrificing me? I asked quietly. She flinched. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was her breathing. Then she took a shaky breath and did something I never expected. She apologized. Not a manipulative one, not the "I'm sorry you feel that way" kind. A real one. I am sorry, she said, tears spilling freely now. I pushed too much onto you because you never pushed back. And when you finally did, I treated you like the enemy. I shouldn't have. You deserve better from me. My throat tightened. Because this was the mother I had wanted for years. The one who saw me not as a safety net, but as a person. But apologies don't erase history. They begin healing, not complete it. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. She wiped her eyes again. I applied for a second job. That surprised me. I didn't want to tell you, she said. I didn't want you to think I was coming to you for sympathy. But it's time I do my part. I exhaled, relief settling like warm sand in my chest. I'm proud of you. She looked at me with a mix of hope and fear. Can we rebuild slowly? I smiled softly. Slowly is the only way it works. She nodded. Then she hesitated. Do you think maybe you could look at the documents with me? Not pay. Just help me understand what's happening. That I could do. Support without sacrifice. Guidance without enabling. We spent the next 40 minutes going through every paper. I explained terms, deadlines, interest rates. She took notes, her hand trembling only slightly this time. Yay. For the first time in years, she wasn't putting it on me. She was learning, trying, standing up on her own legs. When she finally left, she hugged me tightly. Not the desperate, clinging kind she used to give when she wanted something, but a grateful one. A real one. And when the door closed, I let myself fall back against the counter and breathe. Not out of exhaustion, out of release, because something in me finally unclenched. The cycle was breaking. Not perfectly, not magically, but enough. Enough that I could see a future without resentment. Enough that my mother could see me as more than an ATM. Enough that for the first time I didn't feel alone in the family. Later that evening I told Caleb everything. He listened quietly, tracing circles on my hand with his thumb. That sounds like progress, he murmured. It is, I said, for both of us. He kissed my forehead. I'm proud of you, for drawing the line, for holding it, for not shrinking back when they pushed. I closed my eyes and let the weight of his words settle, the kind of support that didn't demand, didn't drain, didn't come with fine print. You're building something healthier, he said softly. Your boundaries didn't break your family, they forced it to grow up. I smiled, because for the first time, that felt true. The next chapter wasn't about survival. It was about rebuilding, on my terms.